And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last weekend.
Yeah, they have nothing else to talk about.
Whoopi Goldberg sat tall at her usual spot on The View, her voice steady and her opinions louder than ever. But what began as another day of confident commentary took a shocking turn that she never saw coming. Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, didn't need to be in the studio to shake the ground beneath her chair. All it took was one explosive statement launched from his own platform, and suddenly the entire audience felt the tremor. With a few choice words, Charlie exposed what many had been whispering for years, that the comfortable empire of The View was built on shaky ground and hollow applause. And just like that, the calm confidence Whoopi wore like a crown began to crack. The tension exploded when Whoopi lumped in thousands of young students with protesters outside a Turning Point event. She tried to smooth it over with a soft apology later, but the damage had already been done. Charlie didn't accept the apology, and he made that clear in a fiery clip that quickly spread across every corner of the internet. He said, "The real question isn't whether I accept it. Do the students accept it?" His words hit like lightning. These were 16 and 17-year-olds, Charlie explained. They traveled across the country, and now they're accused of links to something hateful just because Whoopi said so?
CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So, Charlie, do you accept The View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there, of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country, that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis,
his outrage felt real, and it struck a nerve. Whoopi's smug tone had met its match, not from across a table, but from across the web. Charlie didn't even step into the room, but his argument echoed louder than anyone expected. As the internet exploded with support for Charlie's statement, Whoopi found herself in a place she hadn't been in years, on the defensive. The studio didn't feel so safe anymore, and the audience wasn't so quick to cheer. Whoopi's apology on the show came off like someone reading from a script, trying to put a lid on something that had already boiled over. But Charlie wasn't backing down, not for a second. He revealed, "We had to threaten legal action. That's what it took, just to get an apology. And yes, we're still talking to lawyers." Suddenly, this wasn't just a media moment. It was war. Viewers couldn't believe what they were hearing. Had The View really smeared 5,000 young students? Did Whoopi go too far? The questions kept growing, and so did the outrage. While Whoopi sat trying to explain herself, Charlie calmly built a mountain of facts. Each sentence hit like a hammer, knocking loose the polished image the show had built over decades. He spoke of the elitism, the arrogance, the careless way the hosts threw around labels. Just because someone didn't go to college, Charlie warned, doesn't make them dumb, and working people are tired of being insulted. The clip of him dismantling her argument became a digital storm. Reels, TikToks, and YouTube edits flew across timelines with speed and fire.
Welcome back. You know, in Monday's conversation about Turning Point USA, I put the young people at the conference in the same category as the protesters outside. And I don't like it when people make assumptions about me. And it's not any better when I make assumptions about other people, which I did. So, my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, the state, the U.S.
But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it.
Whoopi's words had been recorded, but Charlie's receipts were impossible to ignore. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. He was focused, calm, and armed with cold, clear logic. And that's what made it terrifying, because it was working. Suddenly, people were replaying the View's segments with new eyes. They started spotting contradictions, double standards, and smugness disguised as insight. The show's bubble of safety was starting to deflate. One user wrote, "I never even watched The View, but now I know why so many stopped." Others asked, how was she allowed to say that on national TV and get away with it? The power of the internet had flipped the script. Whoopi wasn't just facing Charlie, she was facing millions of viewers who were finally paying attention. And what they saw, it wasn't pretty. Charlie's video didn't just challenge her, it shattered the illusion that she and her co-hosts were untouchable. For once, they weren't setting the narrative. They were caught in one. As the fire spread online, Whoopi tried to move on, but the energy in the studio changed. Her voice was still strong, but it had lost something. The untouchable edge was gone, and everyone could feel it. Whoopi sat at the table, holding her usual posture, but her eyes gave away the storm brewing inside. The confidence that once lit up the room now flickered under the heat of accountability. Even as she read her so-called clarification, the neo-Nazis were protesters outside, not part of Turning Point. The damage had already scorched her credibility. The internet wasn't buying the excuse, and neither was Charlie. Charlie's calm dismantling wasn't just surgical, it was ruthless. He didn't have to scream or insult. He simply let the facts speak, and they screamed louder than any rant could. One by one, the falsehoods began to crumble. The idea that Turning Point welcomed hate groups, blown apart. The accusation that 5,000 students were complicit, dismantled in seconds.
You let them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit. I want to make a quick clarification about the neo-Nazi Turning Point event. They were outside protesters. My point was more metaphorical, that you embraced them at your thing, I felt.
The worst part for Whoopi, the silence, not from Charlie, but from her own side. The clapping slowed, the smiles faded. Even the producers seemed unsure when to cue the next segment. When Whoopi glanced off camera, she didn't find her usual safety net of nods and supportive glances. She found nothing but the weight of her own mistake, echoing back at her louder than applause ever could. One commentator said, "You could feel it, the way she looked at the camera, like someone waiting for approval that never came." That's what happens when the illusion starts to crack. And Charlie, he didn't even flinch. He continued, "This wasn't just reckless, it was insidious and careless." He called them out for tossing dangerous accusations around like confetti. He added, "We're still looking into legal options. You don't get to smear thousands of kids and then pretend it didn't happen." And just like that, Whoopi's apology went from awkward to irrelevant. The View's table, once a place of bold opinions and fierce unity, suddenly felt fractured. Even the usual laughter between segments had an unnatural delay, as if everyone was second-guessing the script. The audience noticed too. Comments poured in like a flood. That apology was weak. "She's only sorry she got caught." Charlie didn't just win, he exposed the whole game. It wasn't the words that hurt, it was the exposure. The spotlight that once made Whoopi shine now revealed every flaw, every contradiction, every careless remark she thought would be forgotten. The apology segment, meant to close the door on controversy, only opened the floodgates. Now people wanted to know, what else had they gotten wrong? Who else had they falsely labeled? Whoopi had built a media persona based on certainty, on being the loudest and most unshakable voice in the room. But now, that voice wavered, and viewers noticed. Charlie had proven you didn't need a stage or an audience to land a knockout.
Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach. But I said this to our team. I said working people, the muscular class, including working women, they are so in favor of Trump, and they don't want to be called stupid or uneducated.
You just needed truth, timing, and a Wi-Fi connection. And the blow he delivered still echoed across every screen. The worst part for Whoopi wasn't the apology, it was what followed. A shift in tone, a hesitation in delivery, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the power of the table was slipping. Even long-time fans began questioning what they once accepted without pause. Have they always talked like this about people? One viewer asked. Why didn't we notice sooner? Because the magic spell had been broken. The show that felt untouchable had been touched, and not just touched, but exposed for all to see. What made Charlie's strike so effective wasn't the volume, it was the precision. He used logic like a scalpel, not a hammer, and the result? A quiet collapse happening in real time, but the iceberg had already hit, and people were watching the leak grow wider by the day. Charlie said, "This is about respect. These kids deserve better than to be accused of hate because of where they go to learn." The message wasn't just clear, it was explosive. And it wasn't just conservatives cheering him on. Even some neutral viewers began to speak up, saying, "He has a point." That's when you know the shift is real, when the middle starts to notice. The View tried to change topics in the days that followed, but the energy wasn't the same. Laughter felt forced, smiles were painted on. The usual rhythm was out of tune. The audience didn't forget. Not this time. The silence after Whoopi spoke grew longer. The applause signs had to work harder. Something had changed, and it couldn't be undone. Even Whoopi's signature passion sounded more rehearsed than real. Each line felt like a memory of confidence, not confidence itself. It was all just a little too polished. Backstage, sources whispered about tension on set. Some producers felt the fallout had been mishandled. Others blamed Whoopi for not walking it back sooner. And some, they just wanted the noise to stop. But the internet wasn't done. New videos kept surfacing, dissecting every frame of Whoopi's apology, every body movement, every tone shift.
Florida this weekend. And the liberal panel just couldn't help themselves. The group sent a scathing cease and desist letter after hosts on The View suggested that Turning Point had embraced neo-Nazis who showed up outside the event.
Don't want to say too much, but we're going to have a lot of fun at the Department of Education. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Can I tell you something? Like, I've had quite a few people contact me about that particular post. Like, I'm sure I have 1/100th of what you're getting, but people are contacting me about cabinet posts. I'm like, I got
look,
nothing.
I mean, yeah, I'm actually, after this conversation, heading to Mar-a-Lago for a week, and we have a lot to sift through, and if I could be helpful, I have asked. I want to be actively involved in all things education, as you can imagine. And
it became a digital autopsy of a media meltdown. People were saying things like, "She didn't even look sorry," and "You could tell she thought this would just blow over." But it didn't blow over. It exploded, and left a crater. Charlie Kirk, meanwhile, went on with his show as if nothing had happened. Cool, calm, collected. He didn't gloat, he didn't scream. He just kept talking and letting the truth do the heavy lifting. He didn't just call them out. He lifted the curtain and showed the wires. And once the audience saw them, they couldn't unsee the performance. It wasn't the end of the view, but it was the beginning of its unraveling. Because once people stop clapping out of habit, the whole illusion falls apart. Whoopi's breakdown wasn't a single moment. It was a slow, burning collapse, witnessed by millions. Her power wasn't taken from her. It simply faded with every unanswered question. She wasn't crying or yelling, but the real damage was in her silence. That kind of silence, the kind that shows up when you've run out of defenses, is louder than any scream. Each new episode of The View became a gamble. Would Whoopi address it again? Would someone bring up the backlash? Or would they keep pretending like nothing ever happened? Behind the scenes, sources whispered that confidence in Whoopi had started to waver. Meetings got tenser. Segments were double-checked. There was less room for error and more fear of going viral again. And Charlie, he didn't chase the fame or gloat on air. He just kept showing up with more facts, more data, and more sharp-edged logic. It wasn't personal, it was deliberate. That's what shook them most. Charlie didn't fight dirty, he didn't insult, shout, or storm a set. He simply outclassed the system using their own rules, and that's what made it sting. People began saying, he exposed not just Whoopi, but the whole media game. And they weren't wrong, because when one truth slips through, it opens the floodgates for all the rest. The View, once seen as untouchable, suddenly felt human, flawed, fragile, and breakable.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
The empire of polished rants and studio lights had finally hit a wall it couldn't spin away from. The apology wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Because now, every word they said would be measured, questioned, and rewound. No more blind applause, just scrutiny. The worst part for Whoopi? It didn't happen during a ratings crash or a personal scandal. It happened because one man chose to hit record, and the internet did the rest. She didn't fall from grace with a crash. It was more like a slow sink into uncomfortable truth. She kept talking, kept hosting, but the sparkle, it was gone. This wasn't just a media moment, it was a turning point, a public shift in how people watched, listened, and reacted. No more unchecked narratives, no more unchallenged power. And as Whoopi looked into the camera in the weeks that followed, she may not have cried, but her eyes told the truth. The fear of another takedown, another viral clip, another logic bomb, was always there. Charlie Kirk had done something few ever pull off. He made daytime television bleed without ever stepping on set. No lights, no makeup, no crew, just clarity and confidence. And that's what audiences will remember. Not the applause Whoopi used to get, but the silence that followed when the receipts finally landed on the table. So the next time Whoopi leans in to drop a bold opinion or deliver a monologue soaked in certainty, the audience will remember. They'll remember that one day, someone calmly said, "Prove it," and everything fell apart. It wasn't a takedown with a scream. It was one with a smirk, a single sentence that echoed longer than any headline and hit harder than any applause break ever could. Whoopi Goldberg may still be on The View, but something changed the day Charlie Kirk decided to fight back. Not with fire, but with facts. And the world saw the illusion fall apart, live, unedited, and unforgettable.